Hey, everybody.
What's going on, everybody? Hey, welcome. It's Monday, and you are in the Marriage Shop. Good to see you here.
Yeah. So you're joining us in the marriage shop. I mean, are we in the marriage shop, or are we all in the marriage shop?
I mean, we are collectively, we are in this space that is right now the Marriage Shop.
Yes. Right. So if you are not joining us in the marriage shop. I mean, you're not you're not watching us in the marriage shop.
I mean, they're in the marriage shop.
You are joining us in the marriage shop.
You have come into the marriage shop.
You have come into the marriage shop. So, hey, Nicolette Roll Tide in here early listening while you cook. Greg Hoy from the West Coast coming in hot. We're glad you did. Yeah. Shannon Canning's always glad when you can join us, brother. And hope things are going well. And he says, what's up? Live from the hospital.
He is live. He is like really live from the hospital. I got to imagine that staff has never seen anything quite like Quick Dog Shannon King.
Yeah. Well, bless you. Bless you. Man. Just know that we are praying for you, as we are for many of you that share your journeys with us. Last week we kind of cracked open a number of things. We were talking about being sandwiched, or being the sandwich generation, and being between aging parents and raising kids, and a couple of things were shared during that live. And so Camilla Freeman, if you join us tonight, just know that we're continuing to pray for you, and thank you for for being transparent and sharing your journey with us. And the beautiful thing about that was the way that you all really kind of gathered around her and supported her.
Absolutely.
While we're the ones that are hosting this platform, we're not the platform, you are. Mm-hmm. So we invite you to join us. I mean, we always extend an invitation for you to join us live. Yeah. We could just as easily split the screen and put you right here next to us. Until we way over COVID, we might not be having anybody like physically in the shop, but that might be coming back one day again soon. We've done that in the past.
We'll do it again.
Yeah.
But for now, I mean, we can bring you on virtually. We talked about that before. We're not going to bring on anybody on virtually tonight, though. But we're going to talk about something that I think is really important. So before we jump into it, please, like, share it, with somebody that you believe wants to hear this, needs to hear this.
Yeah.
Go ahead and share it with them right now, because we're going to jump in here in just a second.
Yeah. And one thing that we know for sure is somehow whenever we talk about intimacy or sex, or intimacy and sex, we have a lot of people that are like, yep, tonight is not my night. So if you watch this on the replay, it still applies.
It does. But there's some people who are like, oh no, tonight is the night.
Yeah.
And we're jumping on in there. Right.
Yeah,
and then every now and then, if you're on a platform like this, you'll get that occasional crazy person, right?
Yeah, usually from YouTube.
So if we see the crazies jump in, we'll handle that expeditiously. Don't worry about it.
We'll block them if Facebook doesn't filter it. So anyway, Lady T, thanks for joining us, and I love that she says he is amazing. AWE, that's just so awesome, and the love that the two of you share for each other is inspiring. So thank you for that. And so everybody that has joined us in the Marriage Shop, oh, that's funny. I was just looking at it pop up. Everybody that's joining us in the Marriage Shop, as Mike said, if you think somebody can benefit from this, tag them, bring them on in, and we're going to get this thing going. Okay. So what are we talking about tonight?
Well, so tonight, this topic actually came up because it comes up every time we go and we speak somewhere. There's a question on sex in marriage and, sexual relationships. Those come in a lot of forms, but this one almost always comes up where there's someone in a relationship who is unable, maybe sometimes unwilling, to engage in sex with their spouse. And so we've seen people who've not had sexual relations for, year to 10 years even. And so when someone comes to you and says, hey, what do you do about that? Well, wow. And what do you do with that? Right. That can be a huge problem, and it can create a lot of stress in marriage. And so we thought, might as well go in there because for every one couple that comes forward with that, we know that there are countless couples that they represent. That's just the way it is. And so we fully expect that there will be somebody on this platform, somebody who's watching this, who's going through the same things. And so we thought it was important to deal with this a bit tonight.
Yeah, and we talked about it a little bit in the past. We kind of drop in a few things here and there, but we've never just gone right at it, right? We kind of talk around it. Yep. We make a list and we throw a few things on there, but we don't just say this.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, exactly. And by the way, that's what a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Because it is tough and it can be a little bit uncomfortable. So you dance and talk around it. Now, the truth is, as you all know, there's a point within the point always, right? And so we're gonna be talking about that, but we are gonna go kind of directly at this tonight for sure.
Yeah. And so here's the thing, right? You know our backgrounds, and if you don't, and you're meeting us or joining us for the first time, we have clinical backgrounds. So my background is nursing. I'm a retired nurse. I was a nurse, a registered nurse for more than 22 years. Well, I guess at this point it's like 30-something years because technically I'm still licensed. So that's just crazy. I'm an old nurse. So anyway, my background is nursing, and Mike's background is clinical psychology. And so we'll hit you with a number of things, right? So we'll talk a little bit about the clinical aspects, but then we'll get into some real talk.
Yeah, very, very little clinical though. It's not going to be class necessarily, right? But there's some practical things to think about. But it's not going to be class because people check out of class. We want you to check in, and so we just going to talk about some things that we think are important related to this particular topic, because there's a lot of people struggling with that.
Yeah. Hey, Tara Carroll, thanks for joining us. Been seeing a lot of pictures of you lately. It would be good to see you and catch up with you sometime soon. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah. And appreciate that on the shirt, Shannon. You know what I mean? But it's true. Like, if you raised 2 daughters, you've been through some things. Trust me. So. And
I kind of felt like somebody was going to say something. I feel like we're going to what is this called? Shirt. What kind of shirt is this?
I don't know. What is what kind of shirt?
When you have it's not a logo tee, or what is
graphic?
This?
What are you saying?
A graphic tee.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's like we're going to battle.
we're
like it's got a lot of words
in every shape, but that's like you. I mean, your shade of beauty is beautiful. So
anyway, goodness. Well, thank you. Yeah, so anyway, sidetracked. What we're talking about tonight. So you put on there performance issues with a question mark.
Yeah.
Say more.
Are you having performance issues? Right. I mean, and that's I think we need to start right there with the idea of performance. Because oftentimes when we talk about, so there's several layers, right? So there's intimacy in marriage, right? Now, a lot of people, when you say intimacy, they immediately think sex life. And so for now, let's go ahead and stick with that, right? And so when we talk sex life, for a lot of folks, it's about performance. It's been about performance since the very beginning for them, right? There's a way to do it, right? There's a way to do it right. And there's a way you're supposed to show up. And there's all these things are supposed to happen and all these expectations. And so we create the expectation and then we try to perform to meet said expectations, or we create an expectation for our spouse and we expect them to live up to that expectation, to perform when it's time to perform. And so I think off the bat, that performance thing, that was intentional because I think even the idea of sexual intimacy in marriage as performance is problematic right off the jump.
That's good. I mean, I think if we can kind of slow down just a little bit and give some context, right?
Yeah.
Because I think when we talk about expectations and those expectations that even preempt marriage, right? So there are several ways that you enter into a marriage or into a long-term relationship. Yeah. You either enter into it both never having sex.
Yeah.
Ever in your life before you met, and you're committed to not having sex until you get married. That's one way. You enter into it with one of you having had sex before and maybe the other not ever having sex. Or you enter into it with both of you having had sex before with varied levels of experience. Right. I mean, essentially that's how you enter into it. There's no other option.
So basically what you're saying is no matter how you enter into it, it could be a potential train wreck no matter how.
Well, what I'm saying is you may be starting at different points.
Yes,
and those
absolutely.
Different points, and it's necessary to kind of clarify those different points, right? And so I've been having conversations with both of my daughters recently around sex, and in an interesting way, I guess in a way that a nurse probably has conversations with their daughters. I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but it's interesting to navigate the idea, the concept, the expectations around sex, around how you're driven by hormones, around desires, even in people who are not married, right? And so your background factors in greatly in terms of informing your expectations around sex. So that's where I was going with that. So it was kind of a long journey to get to this point. It is so important that you communicate your expectations around sex before you have sex, before you get married, before you have sex with the person you are going to marry. So let me finish out the whole thought. Why am I saying that? Well, because I think sometimes it's a conversation that we don't have, and sex should always start with a conversation.
Right.
Yes.
So yes, I think for a lot of these people, well, that ship has sailed. Right. And so, you ventured into it and boom. So, and then here you are. The thing is this, no matter how you enter into that and the conversations that you've had, as you go through marriage, it is very common for things to change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And things change for all kinds of reasons. There are all kinds of reasons why people, why their sex life changes, the way that they have sex, what they're able to do changes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
both individually and collectively.
Correct.
And Gavin, oh my goodness,
hey,
my
Gavin.
friend, I haven't seen you in so long, and she says love the shirts. Yeah,
what?
We just
Who
it's
knew?
all graphic tonight.
6 daughters?
Yes, that's what he says.
6 daughters. Man, wow.
And he also dropped in there soul ties, right? Soul ties can change relationships. And I'm glad you dropped that in there. So yeah, this whole idea of sex and how it changes over time, how we change over time. The fact that we change over time means that sex will change over time. Yeah. So many factors that factor in. So when we talk about sexual function, I think really what we're talking about is sexual dysfunction, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the other side of that coin, right? Yes. But and even what we call sexual dysfunction, right? It becomes a real problem. So, what are some of the sources? I mean, when people are challenged in their sex life, what are some things that are happening? So we talked about the performance expectation, right? Living up to something, measuring up to something, or measuring up to someone. All those things can be swimming around in somebody's head, you know, as far as sex life goes. A stress life can impact your sex life.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Like, depression, anxiety, other mental health issues can impact your sex life.
Yeah.
That is negatively. Injury, illness. We talked about aging, lifestyle, your diet, exercise, lack of it, substances, things that you smoke and drink and eat, all those things. Certain medications can impact your sex life. Surgery, past trauma. Pornography can impact your ability to have sex with that human being that's right in front of you, right? And so when we're thinking about the sexual function, if you will, I want you to always be thinking about psychological factors, biological factors, social, like relationship factors, and environmental factors, right? So there's all these things happening, like having sex, it seems like it should be kind of easy, but there's a lot of things happening that impact your ability to do that. Sex is a lot of people don't understand that, like sex, like good sex, like a good sex life is about being relaxed and present in the moment with the person you're with, and not having all these things cluttering your mind and your attention. But part of the issue is, when we talk about those performance expectations, part of the issue is that there's expectations at all. Think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you are distracted by wondering if you can measure up to the other person's expectations, that distraction in and of itself can hinder and impact how you show up. Yeah. You named a number of things, right? We talk about, we could kind of group all of these: sexual problems, medication. You talked about surgery, lifestyle habits, and stress. Fatigue is also another one. All these things factor in over time. So there's the things that happen in an instant, and then there are things that can also happen over time. Yeah. So there's so many factors, right? So there are psychological factors, there are physical factors that impact our ability to sexually or perform sexually. Yeah. So I'm just kind of, so when we, I'm making sure. Yeah. Okay. So that's the recap. So when we're talking about the ability to have sex or perform, I think it falls into this area of, is it your duty to have sex, right? Are we going to talk about that at all?
I mean, if you want to talk about that.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is because we've had people ask us if you have to have sex in your relationship. Is sex required to have a healthy, happy marriage?
Yeah. Well. So from that standpoint, I think we're going to talk about it, because as we kind of go down this, this short list of things to consider, what you might do, ideas or whatever. I think we're going to touch on some things that really address that.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, we've had people who say, oh, well, you know what? When you're together long enough and you've been together for years and you're older, I mean, sex is just not that important. We've had people say that too. And so I'm throwing these things out there because the truth is, none of these things applies to everyone across the board. Every marriage, every experience is unique. What happens in your marriage is unique to your marriage and your relationship. Yeah. So we're saying some things, but they're generalizations, not specifications.
Yeah. So Shamiko, what's going on? Good to see you. Casey asked if there's a Bible verse for this. Yeah, actually, we got a little something for you. Yeah. All right. So just hold on tight, and we got a little something for you on that. But here's what y'all to get, because when things don't go right, when it's our perception that, hey, it's not working, it's not going right, it's not what's supposed to be. Yeah. A lot of times judgment follows, frustration follows, and then isolation can follow, because it's like it's not working, right? And for whatever reason. And when that happens, we've totally missed it, because we've given up intimacy because the sex is not quite working. And so I want to emphasize that point, right? Because oftentimes that's what we do with all that frustration and that isolation that follows something that's not happening right in the bedroom. We give up intimacy. So in effect, we throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we miss the whole point. Intimacy can support a lot of things. A lot of things can flow from intimacy. It's very difficult for intimacy to come from sex exclusively.
So say that again.
I'll say it like this. Sex can flow from intimacy, but intimacy cannot survive on sex alone. And so it is really important to get this difference, that sex is kind of this one piece, but your intimate life is a lot deeper than that.
Yeah.
And that's what will get you through difficulties around this whole idea of sexual function.
Yeah, and I think I've seen something in what we share when we're on the stage that talks about this whole idea that for a lot of people, on one side of it, you may feel like you need to have sex in order to be able to be intimate and close and feel close. And on the other side of it, you may feel like you have to be intimate and close in order for you to be able to have sex. And so it's kind of this dichotomy of sorts, in that if I'm needing one thing to be able to get to that place and you're needing something else, then we might be missing each other, which is why communication is so important. So the key to a healthy sex life is actually great communication.
But you don't just mean like, hey,
it's time.
You know what time it is. You know what day it is.
No. Yeah. No, well, what I mean though is that, sex is complex, right? And so there are so many different aspects of our ability to be able to connect that factor into what our ability to be able to have and perform sexually. And so when we talk about function or dysfunction, right? So you guys have been blowing up the chat. So there are a couple of things. So one person said you have to understand the purpose of sex. So say more about that, because I think we're going to get into that a little bit. Hey, Gerald Wilson, thanks for joining us. It's been a minute. We missed you the last time we saw you, but we saw you a little late.
Good to see you, brother.
But thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And Greg says it's very, very important on how sex was introduced to you. And that really, when we talk about foundationally, right, how it was introduced, what your experience was early, all serves to inform what your expectations are now.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly right. I mean, that's what sets the stage for all these expectations that we bring in.
Yeah.
So think about that, right? Because sex is such a taboo topic, and we all come from these different places. So you got these two people who come in and they're just supposed to work it out, supposed to work right from the beginning. And then all of a sudden there are challenges associated with with that sex life. And so now you challenge the thing that a lot of people don't talk about in the first place.
Yeah.
All right. It's kind of unbelievable, but people will do it. But talk about it. No, we don't want to do that. We don't want to go there. So
yeah. I mean, and well, because it's like, what are we talking about? Right. So I've even heard people say, well, before we can talk, we need to have sex.
You've heard this? You didn't say that.
I have heard this. No, I didn't say.
Okay. No, I'm just saying. I mean, I've never heard that. I've never heard that.
Yeah, that sounded real strange.
I mean, I'm just saying. I don't know. Did it sound strange? Did it sound strange? I don't know.
I mean, that sounded like you were saying. I mean, I know you didn't say that.
Oh no, my inflection. My inflection wasn't quite that. It was like, you didn't say that.
No,
right.
It caught my attention. I don't know. What do y'all think?
I don't know what.
That's kind of how it sounded like. So
that.
yeah. No, but yeah. Before we can talk, right? Before we can share deeply, before I can trust you, before I can share my whole self with you, there's this idea of we have to come together and have sex first, right? Where's that? What?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, there are a lot of different schools of thought on this, but the bottom line is this: you are married to the person that you are married to. I'm on a roll. You are married, right? You're in this long-term committed relationship. You get what you get. And making it work is really what we're here to do. So let's talk about it. What? Go ahead.
You got to read the comment.
About to say something.
No, I was about to talk about it. You know? But because I think a big important first thing, I say it first thing, whatever. There have been many things.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, Greg Hoy is kind of commenting on where he learned about sex and where a lot of us learn about sex. And so a lot of times where we learn about sex, whether it be from magazines, videos, and friends talking, all that stuff, it's about what I can get, not what I can give. Right? It's about performance.
Yeah.
And not sharing. A lot of people brag about their ability to have sex, right? And it's like, you know what? Okay. Like a lot of people can have sex. You ain't special. But we make it about the performance and not about something that you share with another human being.
Yeah.
So that's the first problem, because then when we have this expectation of performance and our expectation is not met, the judgment comes. That can be like toward the person, right? Your partner, your spouse. It can be toward yourself, which can be more damaging, even, right? Yeah. And because your spouse can be saying, "Hey, we're good," and he's like, "No, not good. I didn't live up to this expectation that I set." Based on what exactly did you set that expectation?
Right.
Based on what? Was it what you read in the books, what you saw in the magazines? What your uncle said? Where'd those expectations come from, right? Because a lot of times we pull those expectations, right? Those flawed expectations from flawed sources, but we want to make them gospel. We want to make that the thing. This is the measure, right? This is the standard. If I don't meet it, then there's a problem, and that becomes a real problem for your relationship potential.
Yeah. And I think that, even as we talk about that, there's so many ways that we could kind of take a tangent and even talk about the damaging effects of how sex is introduced and at what point in your life it's introduced. But that's another topic for another day. What we're talking about specifically here tonight, though, because it is related, is this whole idea that you have your expectations not only of yourself, but also of your spouse. And how does that factor into either hijack your sex life or enhance it, right? And so what? I heard it. What?
What? Go ahead, please.
I heard something.
Just continue, girl. We live with the people. Go ahead.
So I know. So when we talked about all of the things that are happening with you, and I said communication has to happen first. The conversation has to precede sex. That means that, of course, that you're continuing to have the conversation. You have to continue talking about it. When you talk about what your desires are, what your dreams are, what your expectations are, then you have an opportunity to inform, enlighten, and to illuminate some things, right? And so when you're having healthy conversations about it, then it's so much easier for you to come together. When you're able to talk about your desires or what feels good or what you like or what you're comfortable with, then that can change your experience altogether. When you're not talking about it, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
Absolutely. And so, a lot of what we're talking about tonight, particularly based on the thing, performance issues, right? Yeah. Which is interesting because when there's stress about sex, about what's going to happen, that also can affect your ability to just engage in this relationship, right? Yeah. So I think you hit it on the head. The first thing, you have to be able to talk to each other, like about what's happening, what's really going on, where you're struggling, what feels good, all those things. I think it's important to give intimacy a chance. And this is particularly, and so because there are some people who are in situations where like sex as they knew it is just not possible. Just not. And so what do you do then? Yeah. And so I think you have to fall back to intimacy and discard all those performance goals. Like literally don't make orgasm the target, for example. A lot of people, that's kind of the measure. Right. And so, but there's just a lot more to your spouse than orgasm.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, right? Yeah. Because I think orgasm is kind of the goal or the target more often than not for men. And I'll make this distinction because I'll say that, you know, almost when you have sex, there's a 95% chance that a man will reach orgasm. There's about a 5% chance that a woman will. And so when we talk about the expectation, even around what's going to happen when we have sex, yeah. I mean, you know, you got to be honest about that too, right? When we talk about people kind of faking it and just kind of going through the motions and we're here. And so I'm just going to get from it what I can get from it. Mm-hmm. Let's have sex. And the exchange is you get to have an orgasm and I get to feel like I'm closer to you. I mean, you know, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Drop some information about that in the
What's
chat.
Your question? Is that a fair exchange?
No. I'm just saying, is that accurate? I mean, that's based on some statistics. It's based on information that we have. Mm-hmm. Casey says 5% ?
Yeah. And keep deleting those other comments, Casey.
Yeah. That's so funny. But I think it's important to have these conversations. And so when we talk about that, right, it's what I want you to believe about what's happening when we're coming together and what is true. And the goal would be for it all to be what's true, that we're able to communicate in a way that hides nothing. Right. Yeah. That we can be unashamed with each other, that we can be honest with each other. And by the way, I don't know that having this conversation just before you have sex is the right time to have it. or right after you have sex. Is that the right time to have it? Well, when's the best time to talk about sex?
Well, it depends on what aspect of sex you're talking about, right? Tonight we're talking about performance issues.
Yeah, performance.
So maybe it's we have some quiet time in the evening. Maybe you're talking in the morning. Maybe like you're coming together and some kind of goes off track and you're just like this isn't happening, not working, whatever. Maybe that's the time. It's hard to know when the time is, but when that time comes, you kind of know. Yeah. And so it's important not to avoid talking about these things. And so in a case where you're finding that there are problems. We talked about, really discarding your expectations. We talked about, changing how you think about sex and really, really focusing on intimacy and learning and sharing each other.
Yeah.
It can be about relearning your spouse because a lot of times it's easy to get caught up in a routine. It's what we do. It's how we do it. These are the steps. We know how it goes. And sometimes we talked about one time before, like, when you getting brand new, right? Oh, and so somebody come with something different one night, you're like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
why you getting brand new, right? So
where did that come from?
Where did it come from? And so because a lot of times it's just like kind of routine, it becomes very rote. Yeah. And so maybe it's about beginning to relearn as things change over time, over the years. Maybe some incident changes, maybe some illness, maybe some medication, that is, whatever. Yeah. But it's about relearning this person. And making it about this whole person, this whole experience. Nicolette said earlier, we caught your comment, Nicolette, like what woman doesn't have all kind of things on her mind, right?
Clutter,
right? Yeah. And so you don't just like try to blast through clutter, right? You just there's a process to really kind of decompressing and being able to just kind of be in the moment. So, but I think it's important to relearn. I think it's important to show grace and compassion to each other, right? You have these expectations. You should realize that a lot of those expectations are based on flawed premises, right? And so when it's not met, rather than accusation, rather than frustration, rather than isolation, maybe grace and compassion.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. So Casey says, so we're just talking about men. No, we're not. And I want to kind of draw two parallels here, right? So when we talk about men, often what comes to mind is erectile dysfunction, right? There's so many, you can't like turn the TV on or turn the radio on for sure, or watch or listen to CNN without tripping across an erectile dysfunction commercial, right? And then they have these pro athletes that are always the ones that are like, yeah, this will make you do this and increase this and do this, and she'll like it too. Those commercials make me crazy.
That dude, I'm telling you what, if that dude is up there talking to me, looking at me like, yeah, she'll like it too. He's a big brother, but I have to take him out.
Yeah, are you talking about that one commercial? Yeah. But
no, I'm just saying that's my bad. I digress.
Kind of what they tend to do. When we're talking about erectile dysfunction, we're talking about trouble getting an erection or inability to have an erection, inability to sustain an erection long enough to be able to have sex, and also decrease sexual desire. In the converse, when we talk about women and we talk about, it's often talked about or described as low libido, which is interesting to me. Low libido kind of sounds like a dance. It just does. You have erectile dysfunction, which sounds like you have a really, really, really major problem, and then you have low libido, which kind of sounds we're gonna do the
low libido. Oh boy.
The truth is sexual desire and sexual function fluctuate over the years. It fluctuates as we age. It fluctuates with hormones, and it fluctuates with where we are in our stage of life.
You know what I find really interesting about that is that we're talking about men in terms of sexual dysfunction, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking about it's like with women it's libido. It's low desire.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some assumptions that are tied up in there that I think are also flawed.
Yeah,
right?
They are. And when we look at the impact or effects of hormone levels, medications, stress, because you've talked about that quite a bit, all of those things factor into being able to have normal, healthy sexual function versus dysfunction. So we are talking about sexual dysfunction in men or women. Yeah. It's just not generally described that way.
Right. It's not described that way. And there's a lot of, and there can even be like pain. Sometimes you can't even explain what that pain is all about. Right. That is with women. And so there can be frustration there, right? Yeah. Because like, well, why is there pain? What's going on? Why don't you just relax and all that?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just not that simple.
Yeah.
But Gray code is out of control.
Yeah. Women, low desire, vaginal dryness, pain you mentioned. There can be I said low desire, didn't I? Did I say that? Yeah. Okay. So those are some of because I didn't give like symptoms of low libido. I just said low libido. Okay. So that's what it was.
And Nicolette's right. It can fluctuate with marriage. And over the course of a marriage, all kind of things impact that. Right. I mean, as you kind of live life together, things change.
Yeah.
And so, when kids come into the picture, for example, that is when they're born, but also when those little monsters are growing up.
Yeah.
Not your monsters. That are the other person's monsters. Right. But there's stress around, kids.
Yeah.
There can be job stress. Of course, hormones changing. Of course, your health status changes. All kind of things are happening over the course of years with someone. And that's why that grace is so very important. That's why relearning, right, and resetting can be very important.
Yeah.
Like your intimate life should not be, it shouldn't be like a target, right? It has to be just a process, a journey that you're walking together.
Yeah.
So get creative. If necessary, seek answers, because sometimes it is about going to get a health assessment, understanding what's going on in your bodies. It can be about hormones. It can be about your psychological health.
Yeah.
So it's important to get answers. Sometimes therapy, sometimes counseling, sometimes treatment.
Yes.
If you need that.
Yeah.
But whatever that is, whether you need treatment or you don't, that grace and that forgiveness and that space is so necessary. I do want to say a little something on getting creative. And so, KC was saying what the Bible say about that. Well, let me tell y'all something, man. Like, so Song of Solomon, I just grabbed a couple. I'm not going to put them up here because I don't want Facebook to shut us down. But Song of Solomon, there's some very interesting things in there. And so, I will let you interpret these for yourself. I'm going to drop them in the chat, but there's a few of them anyway.
Yeah.
But
go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. While you're dropping those in the chat, I was just going to, I was going to mention something. Oh, I was thinking about poor body image. So we talked about changes over time. We talked about stress, fatigue, medical issues, medications, stress, all of these other factors, right? Mental illness, psychological factors, several things that can contribute. But self-image, body image, low self-esteem can also greatly impact not only how we see ourselves, but how we think the other person sees us.
Yeah.
And as we age, I said this recently, that gravity takes hold. It doesn't matter who you are. No one is immune, right? And so we sometimes have this expectation that we're always going to be slim and trim and fit and perky, just like we were early in life. And that's just not true. And so when that is the thing that we become fixated on, we're holding our spouse to an unattainable goal oftentimes. And I'm not saying, I mean, some of you, I mean, you're out there, you're killing it. You look better than you did when you were in your early 20s. Not talking to you, but for many people, just in general, in stage and age in life, you can expect that they're going to be somebody changes. The quicker we are to embrace those changes, the easier it is for us to be able to not only accept and love ourselves, but to receive from the other person.
Yeah. And that the idea of acceptance, so important, like to accept your spouse as they are. We spend a lot of time trying to change them, trying to have them be somebody different, do something different, do it this way. How about accepting the person that is right there in front of you right now as they are? Because that is what God has done for us.
Yeah.
As we are. He's not waiting for us to get right before we're accepted. You're just accepted. And so that's another way that marriage can model the love of God through this. So anyway, this unconditional love as you are.
Yeah. And I think it was Greg that dropped in there. I think it was Genesis 17:6. I don't know if you can pull that up, but yeah, I mean, so Nate, hey, thanks for joining us. He says empty nesters, right? And so this whole idea of even having an empty nest is almost like you find yourself where you were. It's like you're early in your marriage, you have children, you go through raising your children, and then it's like you've been put on pause. And once they're gone, you're able to kind of pick up where you were before you had the children. For those of you that have children, for some people, that's true. For some people, they kind of lose their way during that time, right? The children replace their spouse in terms of companionship and in terms of being able to relate to each other and in terms of sharing. And so when they leave, you find that the person that you're with is a stranger more so than they ever were. So it's so important. And we talked about it, but it's so important to stay connected and continue to check in with each other throughout your marriage. If you've been married longer than a week, check in.
Yep. And because it's easy, that distance, it's easy for that distance to grow, right? To get in there. And so I've dropped a bunch of scriptures from Song of Solomon. I want y'all to go grab your husband, grab your wife, and just kind of check out some of those. You tell me what they're talking about. They're using some very creative language. You tell me what they're talking about. Right? Yeah. So that first one is very interesting.
So. Another point, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to step all over the scripture, but another point is we've been talking about things that happen and occur naturally, right? Yeah. Normal things, changes that occur over time, but there's also effects of things that you do to yourself. Lifestyle habits, for example, smoking and drinking and doing drugs all have a negative impact on sexual performance. Yeah. There is a direct link.
Yeah.
You said what?
No, you said that like boom, like.
Oh yeah, there's a direct link. There's no doubt. I mean, no, I'm not gonna say don't drink and don't smoke and don't do drugs. But if you're smoking and drinking and doing drugs, and then you're having or experiencing low sexual performance or impacted sexual performance or inability to sexually perform, then that may be the cause, and it's something that's self-inflicted.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. And so, look, I put those scriptures in there just to show you a few things that are in the Bible that are clearly talking about an intimate relationship between a man and a woman. All right, maybe to free you up, to give you a few ideas about being and getting a bit more creative in your own sex life. Right. I think what it boils down to is this last scripture here that you will find in the chat. This is Galatians 22 through 23. This is the fruit.
5:22 to 23.
I'm sorry, Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 through 23, which says, but the fruit of the Spirit, right? If the Spirit is in you, it's love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. right? And that forbearance is really about being patient and holding off. You know, if you think somebody owed you something, you all know. Some of y'all got that forbearance during COVID, you know, right? Like, no, not now. It's okay. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, when you talk about the relationship with your spouse and you talk about this person that you've chosen to spend the rest of your life with, if these are at play, if you're working in this way, love, joy, peace, right? Forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. If you're handling your spouse in that way, mm-hmm. then you can navigate the rest of these things, right? Together. It is when we come with more negativity and harshness and expectations and demands where we run into problems and create isolation. Fruits of the Spirit here, that will create closeness and intimacy.
Yeah.
Right? Which in some cases is really all you need in the first place.
Yeah.
In order for everything else to line up.
Yeah. And we talked about sometime in last year or the year before that it's not your spouse's job. It's not your job to heal your spouse. And, when we talk about sex, often there's this element or this undercurrent of, well, what if there was a past negative sexual history or something that has happened to the person? How do you navigate those things? And again, a different conversation for a different day. But I introduced that here because as you're relearning your spouse, as you are seeking more clarity, as you are engaging in conversations about how the two of you can become more intimate in order to then maybe propel your sex life forward, it's necessary to uncover all of those things, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe there's something in there. There's a reason why my desire is low or your desire is low. Maybe there's a certain way I don't like to be touched. Like when I was like, don't come at me in the closet.
You know what? That's funny. Now, that's a true story.
That's based on watching old scary movies.
But it was, how am I supposed to know? Like, and it was closet and it was whatever. But Wendy, like almost, it was just like
no
forearm. She became like a defensive lineman or something, like in an instant. Like,
yeah,
no closet.
And in that situation, anyway. I mean, I didn't really have an explanation for that. There was no sordid history, and y'all know, I mean, we're pretty much out there with most of our history and things. Transparent about that. There's no history in that. I don't even know where that comes from. I just know, the closet is just not the place. It's off limits. And so until that happens, right? But as you said, when it happens, may be the time to have the conversation, right? It's not just, I'm rejecting you with no explanation for why I'm rejecting you. Each of us wants to be accepted. Each of us wants to be loved, and each of us wants to be appreciated. And we want to feel good, right? Yeah. We want to know that, hey, you get me. And what I'm here to do is to give to you. I'm not just here to receive from you. Mm-hmm. Right. I think we all want to be in that place. And when we can be there together, then what we create is something that's much more, it's much deeper, and it's much more fulfilling than maybe what we had before. Yeah.
And so ultimately, it becomes not a thing of performance. I don't expect you to come in here and perform.
Yeah.
Right. I just need you to be here. And I won't expect you to live up to some standard. Right. I want to know how I serve you in this moment. Right. How do we make this something that we're sharing, not something that we're coming expecting to take something away necessarily. Right. So I don't know. So that's really, I think we want to get ready to wind it up. Mm-hmm. Unless you have something else. But I just, I think it's really important to give yourself some grace and give each other some grace as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of questions around sex and sexual function. I just invite you to do a little research, but the challenge here is to have the conversation. If you haven't had this conversation before, have this conversation, have a deeper conversation, share some things that maybe you didn't feel comfortable sharing before. And if you're still not ready to do that, invite a third party, a counselor, or someone who is trained to maybe be able to have the conversation in a way that's non-threatening, that can be open and can be productive. Because what you don't want to do is force each other into a situation that's uncomfortable for both of you. Mm-hmm. That makes it more strained and adds more stress, right? Testing how ready you are to be able to navigate this is also critical before you just dive in. The bottom line is, and I think we started with it at the top, we're not all starting from the same place. The only thing that matters is that you know where your spouse is.
Like physically, or
where they're starting from, the place that they're starting from, not physically.
Of course.
Yes.
Hopefully you know where your spouse is.
So we've enjoyed sharing this with you guys tonight. If you have other questions around sex, sexual function, sexual dysfunction, by all means, you can hit us up. You can drop it in the chat. You can DM us. You can send all of those questions that you may have. And we're happy to shed some light and share some insight if we have it, or point you in the right direction. But the whole idea is, can you have a sexless marriage? You can, if that's what you both agree to. And can that marriage be fulfilling and thriving and happy? It absolutely can.
Yeah, but that marriage probably will not be fulfilling, and it probably will not feed you if it is absent of intimacy. So give intimacy a chance.
Yeah.
All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just come tonight just thanking you for who you are, thanking you for this day. And we just ask that you bless everyone listening, everyone watching. We ask you help them to come together and to love each other in the way that you love us, God, just unconditionally. We ask that you bless their intimate lives, God, so they can continue to come closer together, and that their relationships, their marriages be a living example of the love that you showed us through your sacrifice, your son, Jesus Christ. So we thank you tonight. We love you. We pray these and all blessings in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Oh, so bonus challenge. Those scriptures that Mike dropped in the chat, the challenge would be to go to Song of Solomon, Song of Songs, and to read those scriptures out loud to each other. Have some fun with that this week.
Have some fun with that. And I mean, just see if you can, some of those require a little bit of interpretation. See if you can interpret what they're trying to say. Mm-hmm. I mean, and the rest, it's up to y'all. Anyway, so we're going to get out of here. You all have a good night. We will see you next week.
Yeah. Bless you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's your boy JC. I'm in the mood. Love. Lately I've been constantly thinking about you, babe. You drive me crazy. Yeah. Girl, I want this. Got me all up in my feelings. Oh, the feeling, yeah. I knew the first time I laid eyes on you that you would be here forever. I'm not being arrogant, and I still can't take my eyes off you. 'Cause you made me better, so much better. I'm in the mood to love you for a lifetime. I'm in the mood to love you for a lifetime. I love your kindness, I love your confidence. Ooh, you're the finest. So glad you're mine, yeah. I don't wanna be with nobody else. Give me your love, that's all the wealth I need. Baby, you're priceless to me, yeah. To love you for a lifetime. I'm in the mood to love you for a lifetime, yeah. Promise I'ma be around. I'ma always hold you down. Won't you come and hold me now? Won't you come and hold me now? I just got no cool. Yeah, I know I got a rule, but I always keep it down with you. Yeah, and I know they see, girl, you're my queen. And beauty speaks for itself, loud and clear. Yeah. So throw it in the air. It's the sweetest sound to follow my ear. And I want the world to know I'll love you forever. And that's a long time, babe. And I got time for you, baby. I'm in the mood. Ooh, for a lifetime. I'm in the mood to love you, yeah. For a lifetime, baby. Ooh, yeah. For a lifetime, oh, for a lifetime, yeah, yeah.